Welcome to Indicators and Performance Management of Failures in Asset-Wise IVARA Performance Management. By the end of this unit, you will understand how indicators and states are linked to failure modes, and how this link helps to automate much of the performance management of failures processes. Performance management of failures is the process of detecting and addressing failure events and using the results to guide the management of the reliability program sustainably. Indicators and states are the tools that APM uses to detect failure events. Most indicators and states are designed to detect a single failure mode. So if we link the indicator state to a failure mode, we can use indicator readings to kick off a failure event or failure record automatically. These failure events are critical in driving and deriving value from the Performance Management of Failures program. In order for these records to be populated properly, we first need to understand and update some of the APM settings. Prior to linking failure modes with indicator states, we must update the work identification and indicator settings. The first setting needed is found in the Work Identification view, Settings tab, Work Identification subtab, Defaults page, and Indicator States page. For the indicator states failure values for indicators created on an action plan from an indicator template section, the value Use values from the action plan should be selected. This will ensure that when an indicator is created from a template via a maintenance action plan or failure mode, the new indicator that is created will have its state's failure information populated from the current failure mode. This is important in that the failure information of the current maintenance action plan or failure mode on an actual analysis is more accurate than the failure information which may have been populated on the indicator template, as indicator templates are not context specific. The indicator states failure values for existing asset indicators identified on an action plan setting is dependent on the client's history of analysis and indicator creation. For new clients, those who have not yet created indicators, the third option, use the values from the action plans if those from the template are blank, is typically the desired option. With this setting, for those indicators linked to more than one failure mode, the failure mode and failure information will not be changed by APM automatically every time the indicator is linked to a new failure mode. This forces a business process of manually reviewing the indicator state's failure information each time an indicator is linked to an additional maintenance action plan or failure mode. The implementer will then review the failure information for each state and select the most likely or frequently occurring failure mode to use when generating the automatic failure record. This is often seen with things like vibration analysis or other broad predictive maintenance inspection technologies, because they can detect dozens of specific failure modes, such as imbalance, misalignment, flat spotting, soft foot, etc. For existing clients new to work identification analysis, but with a substantial amount of indicators, the second option, use values from the action plan, is selected. This is because these clients will be linking existing indicators to newly created maintenance action plans or failure modes. Because indicators in this scenario are unlikely to already have existing failure modes linked to states, the third option is generally safe to use also. The use values from the indicator is typically only used if planning to manually update all indicators after all analyses are completed. This can be tedious and is generally not recommended. Each of these settings are used as the default options when creating an MTA or RCM2 analysis. These settings can be changed on an individual analysis as needed. The last setting needed is an acknowledgement setting. Go to the Indicators view, Settings tab, Indicators subtab, and defaults page. In the creation of failures from indicator alarm section, make sure that create a failure record when an alarm is acknowledged is selected. This setting is the switch that turns on the automatic failure record generation. With this setting selected, every time an indicator with states goes into alarm and it's acknowledged, a failure record will be created automatically in the background. The information that populates on this failure record is taken from the failure information linked to the indicator state. We will see this a little later in the video. Linking of failure modes to indicator states. Failure mode information links to the indicator state automatically based on the analysis option we've just selected. The linking is done once the maintenance action plan is marked as implementation complete. Failure information is state specific and is updated to suit the state manually. I will now demonstrate how this is done. Step 1. The indicator state is automatically updated with failure information during an analysis. If we open a condition-based maintenance action plan that is not marked as implementation complete, and then open the indicator to the state, to the failure information page, we can see that the information is still not populated. This is because we haven't yet told APM that our work with the maintenance action plan is done. Let's exit out of here. And we'll mark the action plan as implementation completed. Next, we need to find the indicator that we wish to update the failure information for. We'll open up the indicator, go to the States tab, then we'll put the indicator in edit mode, double click on the state, and then we'll click on the failure mode information tab. Review the failure mode. If the failure mode is not the desired default failure mode for that indicator, click on the Browse button to review the list of all failure modes. You should first search this list for failure modes associated with the indicator's asset or child assets. Highlight the appropriate failure mode and then click OK to change it. Once the indicator state is linked to the appropriate failure mode, you need to review and update the failure information on this Failure Mode tab for accuracy. Next, you need to anticipate the PDAF interval remaining until consequence, or time until partial or total failure. This should be less than the failure mode's PDAF interval. This depends on what states are selected, but a good starting point is as follows. For condition-based indicators, the PDAF interval remaining equals the PDAF from the failure mode minus the inspection frequency minus the planning horizon. For alarm states, the PDAF interval remaining is equal to the planning horizon. And for critical states, the PDAF interval remaining should be 0, as we're very near the time of consequence. There is generally only one abnormal state for a failure finding indicator. It is usually listed as critical. PDAF interval remaining for these is logically 0. Some clients create a new state type called failed, so as not to give people the illusion of having some buffer time left. Therefore, PDAF interval remaining for critical or failed hidden states is 0, as you are at elevated risk of significant consequence, but may not be technically suffering the consequence yet. These are not hard and fast rules, and often the planning horizon is accounted for in the frequency of inspection. What is desired is the anticipated amount of time the equipment can be safely run from when the state can be detected and when the operation is at undue risk. Lastly, ensure that Create a Failure when this alarm is acknowledged is selected, and then select the failure severity appropriate to the indicator state using the following logic. For warning states, we should choose potential failure. For alarm states, we also choose potential failure. For critical states, we'll choose partial failure or total failure. And for failed states, we'll typically choose hidden failure. Once you select the severity, click OK. And repeat these steps for the remaining indicator states. Failure records are created when an alarm is acknowledged. When an acknowledgement is done for an indicator reading where the state is linked to a failure mode, failure information is populated on the Acknowledgements Failure tab. The acknowledger reviews the failure information that will be populated on the failure record from the acknowledgement. This review includes an update, if required, of the failure mode responsible for the current alarm, the anticipated time remaining until failure, or P to F interval remaining, the likely avoidance savings, and the severity of the current state. As well, the acknowledger will do a preliminary categorization of the type and classification of the failure. All of these values may be updated when the failure record is resolved. Upon completion of the acknowledgement, the failure record that is created will appear in the Open Failures configuration in the Performance Management view on the Failures tab. You can see our failure that we've just created is here. This information is reviewed and updated as part of the Performance Management of Failures process, which will be discussed in another presentation. By completing this unit, you should know how indicators and states are linked to failure modes. Know what information is needed to be updated when linking the indicator state to a failure mode, including reviewing the failure mode information, categorizing the failure, and determining the P to F interval remaining for that particular state. And know how this link helps to automate much of the Performance Management of Failures process. This concludes the Indicators and Performance Management training session.